All right, welcome everyone. Thanks for taking some time out this evening to listen to a presentation on Oregon budget law and how it pertains to the process here at the City of Cresswell. Um, I'll try not to make it dry and boring, uh, and I'm glad that Mayor Stram, or former Mayor Stram, pardon me, is here with us tonight. He may be able to share some stories and put the revised statutes, the Oregon revised statutes, the law that we use for budget into context, into um, real life budget meetings that we've had. And some of you have been on the budget committee. Um, so I'm going to share my screen with the presentation here and dig right in. All right. Can everyone see that?
Yes.
Excellent, excellent. And I'll share this PDF with everyone after the meeting. Um, good evening. First of all, first order of business is that there is no business. So we could have a quorum, we could have a meeting if we take action or discuss the budget in any way, shape, or form. So since we didn't publish the budget meeting, this is really just a meeting to address how the budget process works in the state of Oregon. So please, keep your questions about the budget to the budget meeting when we actually have the budget meeting. Tonight is just a training. All right, so you're probably all wondering, what is local budget law? Well, local budget law is defined in the Oregon Revised Statutes, and you'll hear me refer to ORSs throughout the presentation. Just the legal code for the state of Oregon, and you'll find it in 294.305 to 294.565. And I'll share with you what I've shared in the past. There's a little booklet. Dave, you've received this in the past. I think it's like 17 pages of how to get through the budget, all the legalities, a lot of Q&As, and a lot of what I'm covering tonight. And so that'll be helpful to have as well. But local budget law basically establishes standard procedures. So there's procedures set out on how we do budget in Oregon by law. It outlines the programs, the fiscal policies, of course. It requires estimate of resources and expenditures. That's how we get a balance, right? We have money coming in, money going out. It encourages citizen involvement, as you know, with the citizen members here on the budget committee. And it's the control of expenditure of public funds. And why do we follow budget law? Well, it allows us to legally spend money. And there's a ORS here on the slide that is pretty important to follow, because if you expend money beyond the appropriated amounts, then you can be civilly liable to return the money by suit of the district attorney, and none of us want that. And if expenditures constitutes malfeasance in office or willful or wanton neglect of duty, that's not something we want. So we follow budget law. What is a budget? A budget is a financial plan. It contains estimates of revenues and expenditures for a single fiscal year. And our fiscal year is July 1 through June 30. That throws a lot of people off because we don't follow the calendar year. It's an internal control mechanism. This is a great mechanism for internal controls. Monthly, department heads receive a budget to actual statement to kind of follow along throughout the fiscal year to see where they're at. And if there's something miscoded, they'll usually see it. They'll see, well, this can't be right. This is, the year's almost up and I've spent this entire line item. Well, then we go back and look, okay, what got recorded there, and do journal entries to fix those. So it's a great internal control mechanism. It's a policy document. As you know, we have planning documents throughout the city for water, sewers, streets, and every year we need a budget to make sure that the city's priorities are addressed with the fiscal dollars that are received. It's a public communication document too. It expresses the city's goals to the citizens of Cresswell. Now, the budget committee, that's what you're all here for. It consists of the governing body and an equal number of appointed citizens. And your primary roles are to hear the budget message, which you'll hear at the first meeting, hold public meetings, which we do by noticing them and making sure that everyone has the ability to attend the meetings, whether it be in person or virtually. Um, we hear public comments and we review and discuss the proposed budget, and then we make any revisions and come back, and hopefully in the second meeting or third meeting, the budget committee will approve the budget. Now, the budget, once it's approved, will then go to the council, and the city council will adopt the budget through resolution, and they also adopt the tax, the tax rate for the city. So the 9 steps, as you can see in the next slide, are appoint the budget officer, um, and that's me every year. It's one of my duties as finance director is to put together the budget. Um, we publish the budget notice. Get that notice to Roberta, and she puts it in the newspaper. Uh, Dave Stram, do you have a question?
I'm not getting any slides. I'm just seeing you.
Oh no! Oh no! I'm sorry, Dave. It must be the presenter view that you're in, and without being on your side of the computer, I'm not sure how to fix that. I
Okay.
apologize. I'll make sure to send them to you though.
Okay.
So we publish the budget notice, and then the budget committee meets. And there's laws on how we publish the budget notice. We have to publish it 2 separate notices a week apart, and I believe 5 days before the meeting for the second notice. So it's well published. We publish it in both the Register Guard and the Creswell Chronicle. We also put it up in the post office and post it on City Hall. And we put it on the website. The committee then meets and approves the budget, as we discussed, and the budget summary then gets published in the paper. So this is the actual budget. It'll get published as approved by the budget committee in the newspaper, and then we'll hold a budget hearing at the city council meeting in June, and then the city council will then adopt the budget, which makes the appropriations and it declares the taxes. And then finally, we have to get that budget to the county and to the state shortly thereafter. So budgeted fund structure. I'm gonna say a whole bunch of accounting jargon. One of the jokes I used to say as an auditor was that the definition of an auditor, or a CPA rather, is someone who tells you you have a problem you didn't know you had in a language you don't understand. So bear with me, and I'm willing to take questions along the way. Dave, do you still have your hand up? Do you have a question?
No.
Okay. I will. I'll get back to the presentation then. The budget is prepared and organized by funds. Funds are a self-balancing set of accounts used to record estimates of resources and requirements for specific activities and objectives. A simplified explanation of that is just think of each activity that the city does as being a bucket. Like water's a bucket, sewer's a bucket, the streets are a bucket, and we put in all the resources we have for those activities, and then we spend out of those buckets. So that's what a fund does. We keep it separate in each fund. There's different types of governmental activities that use various types of funds, and state statute actually outlines the basic fund types, and you can read yourself to sleep on those fund types. I'll go over them very briefly. There's a general fund, and this accounts for all expenditures of a governmental unit which are not required to be accounted in other funds. So it's basically everything else. What you'll see in this is property taxes, franchise fees, license and permits, the state shared revenues for liquor, cigarette, fines, and interest earnings. And then we have to categorize those expenditures by the types of activities that happen in general fund. So we have general administration for the accounting and the payroll function, and the things that we do for the various administrative duties for the city. And then we have culture and recreations where we capture all those like park type activities, and then public safety, of course. For we have court, the contract with the Lane County Sheriff's Office, and code enforcement. And then you have planning and land use, where your city planner um, works on land use issues and zoning and so forth. So those think of those as departments within the general fund. And the general fund is the one fund that you have to budget by those categories. Other funds, like special revenue funds, are used to account for revenues derived for special or for specific taxes or other dedicated or restricted funds. That's why you see the street fund as a separate fund. The street fund takes on state shared or state highway funds, and these are the state gas taxes and the fees that come from the DMV for vehicle registration that come to the city. And those funds can only be used on streets. So they have to be kept in a separate fund. And then 1% of those funds have to be used on bicycle and pedestrian paths by ORS. So then we have a separate fund for the bicycle footpath. And then we have to have a building department fund to keep track of all those building permit fees that we take in and all the activities like inspection services that go along with those building permits. Enterprise funds, you can think of those as a business, basically, a business type activity. So anything that takes in a revenue from a user and then pays for those, and then pays out of those fees for the activity. Good examples of those are water fund, sewer fund, and we have an airport fund that operates as an enterprise fund. Reserve funds, those are established by ordinance or resolution to hold monies, and they're expended again for a specific purpose. You can think of those as like our SDC funds, where we take in system development charges from developers as they apply for building permits, and those SDC fees go into a fund and can only be spent to expand those services like water, sewer, streets. A debt service fund is just that. It's a special fund that we take out debt, and the payments go through that fund. And a prime example of that is our local improvement district fund. Other fund types, capital project funds. This is where we put money away for capital projects. These are usually larger projects. Think of them as things over $25,000. A road, we just did A Street, that was done in the streets capital project fund. So how does that look in the budget? This slide here, the budget structure and budget detail format, line item descriptions. You'll see a description for each type of expenditure, each type of revenue, and you'll see a description, and then in the column after that, you'll see actual for 2 years previous to the current budget year. Then you'll see the budget year that we're in right now, that'll end June 30th of this year. And you'll see some projections, so we can kind of annualize some amounts or look back at last 3 months of last year and kind of project where this year is going to end up. And that's just for analysis. You can see how budgeted lines are getting expended or not expended in the current fiscal year. And then you'll see a proposed budget. That's what we'll come to the budget committee with. And then the approved budget, once the budget committee has discussed it or made changes to the budget. And then finally, the last column is the adopted once the city council adopts the budget. All right, so for revenues, they should be reflected by category. And they should reflect an accurate estimate of what is anticipated during the coming fiscal year. So, I can estimate that property taxes are going to come in, based on historical, I think they're going to come in 3 to 4% of what greater than last year. But I can't estimate that they're going to be 100% of last year. That would be that wouldn't be appropriate. So they should reflect an an accurate estimate of what is anticipated. Revenues are not appropriated, so we're not restricted to only spending. We're restricted to spending by appropriations, but revenues are not appropriated. So just because we have a revenue doesn't mean we can spend it. I guess the purpose of the revenues is to show that we have the resources to expend the appropriated budget. Fund expenditures. In order to lawfully spend money, expenditures must be prepared according to budget law, and they have to be, ultimately, the requirements state that expenditures shall be estimated each budget period, shall be identified by organizational unit or program, and shall equal the total resources. So in the state budget, we have to balance. And there's classifications, and these are, again, defined by the ORSs. They don't always make sense to me, like personal services. I don't know why they didn't call it personnel services, but think of this as staffing. This is staffing and all the benefits that go with staffing. And then you have materials and services. This is, chemicals at the water treatment plant. Also in materials and services, you'll find professional services. So if we have to hire out for attorney services, you'll see them under materials and services. Capital outlay is just that. That's the capital projects that we do at the city. And debt service are the debt payments that are made every year. Transfers going to and from funds, and then operating contingency. That is something that's defined in the ORSs, and there's some limitations on how you can change those categories in terms of dollars, and we also have some policies on what we should have as far as contingencies, and then unappropriated ended fund balance. This is what's left after we spend all our resources. So every year we'll have some fund balances roll over. These are monies that aren't spent from a previous year. They'll be our opening fund balance, and then once we spend down all our resources, or we spend all our appropriations, we likely have some unappropriated ending fund balance that'll roll into the next year. So here's an example of what the budget looks like, line by line here. You see the description, a couple years of actuals of budget, and this cuts off. I think it carries over to the next page. Here's our projected amount. This column will be filled in. The proposed budget will fill in. And again, you notice that all the resources have to equal all the requirements. And it just makes sense. So for the coming fiscal year budget, this is 21-22 that we're budgeting for. On Monday, May 3rd, you'll be presented the budget message. You'll get a copy of the budget. The budget committee will be able to ask questions of the city manager, myself. Department representatives will have the public works director there, the airport manager there. And then it'll be more of a message and budget. You'll want to take that budget home and read it. You got 2 weeks before the next meeting. And then at the next meeting on May 17th, we'll have a public hearing, and we'll have deliberations then on the budget. We'll have the budget committee will complete those deliberations, and then they'll recommend approval of the budget. If we have to have a third meeting, there is time. There is another 2 weeks before we actually have the city council meeting, so there is time to have a third meeting if necessary. Fiscal year 21-22 budget again will be taken to the council at the Monday, June 14th city council meeting. They'll have another public hearing, and they'll adopt the budget. And that's really important because before we can expend any monies on July 1, we have to have an adopted budget. So it's crucial that we get through the process. And then, as I stated earlier, July 15th, we have to get 2 copies to the Lane County tax assessor, so they can send the taxes to the city as they come in. And then by the September 30, we have to have them to the state as well. Does anybody have any questions? I know this is pretty dry stuff. I've got a list of common Q&As that we've had in the past. It may answer some of your questions. It may spark some new questions. So if you have questions after the budget presentation, feel free to contact me or Administrator Amberg. Excuse me, that's not Manager Amberg. I apologize for that. You can request any information required during the consideration of the budget. So, if you need line item detail, we can provide that. What if the governing body changes the budget approved by the budget committee? This is a big one. It's actually in the budgeting manual as well. The governing body has the right. So you as the budget committee could approve the budget and it goes to the council. But that right is still has some limitations. So under ORS's, the council cannot increase the budget more than 10% by appropriation. So that would be like total personal services for a fund, or total materials and services. So they can't change it by more than 10% without it going all the way back to the budget committee and having another budget committee meeting. And as you see, the timeline's pretty tight. We'd have a really hard time, or we'd have a really close to meeting the deadline to go back to the committee and then come back to the council again for adoption. So the council really has like that 10% variance that they can change it once it's been approved. Can it be changed after it's adopted by the council? It's another question. Yes, you can change it. This happens when we have unforeseen circumstances. For example, we get a grant awarded to us, so we didn't, and we need to appropriate the monies to spend during the fiscal year. So under these circumstances, we can go back to the council and get those funds appropriated. Again, there's a public meeting. Again, the council will look at what is being asked and take a vote on it. It's not just automatic. It does have to go back to the council. So there are actions that must be taken before more money is spent. What is appropriated in the adopted budget? So those were some of the big ones. Those were some of the big ones I had when I first started doing budgets. I've been on the other side as the auditor doing budget testing under the Oregon minimum standards. So I've seen quite a bit. I've seen budgets that didn't balance. So as you're reviewing it in that 2-week period, please, check the math, make sure that resources equal expenditures requirements. And I've got links here to the budget manuals. There's a 17-page version, and then there's a hundreds page version. So yeah, it's quite lengthy. Dave, did you want to share any anecdotal stories with us?
No, I can't think of any right offhand. I think the one point that's important to me is that the community members feel very much empowered to be full participants in the budgeting process, that their vote counts as much as votes of any council members. And that really came to bear the very first budget committee meeting I was a part of, when we had a long debate on the Cobalt building. And most of the council members wanted to sell the Cobalt building, thinking it was not of real value to the city anymore. But I felt differently, thought that we should save the Cobalt building and put it to some good use. So when we finally came to a vote, 5 councilors voted to sell the Cobalt building, 2 councilors voted to keep it. There were only 6 citizens at the budget committee meeting. 1 of them was absent. 5 of them voted to keep the Cobalt building. 1 kept to sell it, voted to sell it. So the vote ended up being 7-6, with the the city members, not the council members, but the citizens holding sway. And so the budget passed on a 7-6 vote. And shortly after, the food pantry moved in to the Cobalt building and has had a wonderful opportunity to serve out of that building and other things. But that was really an example of when the council members voted one way, but the citizens voted the other way, and they carried the day. So I just think citizens need to really feel empowered that this is their budget committee, and their vote counts as much as the vote of all the council members as well. So that was my experience.
That's excellent. Excellent story. I really appreciate that. Wow, it seems like I flew through that. And nobody fell asleep. That's good. Appreciate that. Yeah, this stuff is pretty dry. The budget itself, though, is a living document, and it really does show what people want done with the city funds, and we appreciate that. And so, unless anybody else has any questions, um, I'll end the meeting and see you guys 1st of May, May 3rd.
All right, I appreciate it.
All right. Thanks everyone for coming.